Picture it. You retire fabulously abroad with full gay acceptance, glass of Vino Verde in hand, and zero daily Trump-induced stress.
That sounds really nice. And this is Career Money episode 613. Today, we are exploring how you can make that dream your reality too.
We're joined by Pedro Lino, CEO of Optimized Investment Partners, to discuss how their Golden Opportunities Fund can help turn your Portuguese dream into your reality. Wine and Lisbon instead of U.S. chaos?
We've recently learned of a truly fabulous way to help get you there. Details coming up.
Welcome to the show, Pedro.
Thank you so much, David and John, for having me here.
Yeah, we're excited to have a meaty conversation, something that I think is on a lot of people's minds, especially our listeners and viewers. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of Optimize, we're seeing a lot here in the U.S., especially a lot of increased attacks on the LGBTQ plus community, threats to democracy, and struggling economy, even though we're being told it's not necessarily. For gay Americans worried about their future here, why does investing in a golden visa make sense right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, John, as you mentioned, there's lots of uncertainty these days, and basically this Golden Visa program, which is an investment program, and then you can get the citizenship, is an affordable way and a legal pathway for European Union residency and eventual citizenship. So you have extra mobility for you, for your family, for your parents also, and you don't have to leave the US. So we are talking about a program that actually what gives you is an optionality. It's like an insurance. It's like an hedge. As you do hedging with your investments, you can do also hedging with your life. So you can have a plan B that protects you, the ability to work, to live, and to travel freely along Europe without leaving the US. So it's like an optionality and an hedge due to all the uncertainty that is going through, not only in the US, but also around the world.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because there isn't a requirement to actually move to Portugal as soon as you sign up for this. As you said, you can use this as an option to stay in the US if you want. And we know that a lot of folks who are listening and watching may still be on the path to retirement or may not be ready to leave the country. But this gives you the option or the availability of being able to go when it's your time on your timeline.
Yeah, David. So actually, the majority of our clients are still living in the US and they're planning to live in the US. What they are actually investing in is in the plan B. So if something happens, or if at a later stage in their lives, they want to move to Portugal or spend 6 months in the US, 6 months in Portugal, or even for their kids. We have clients that want their kids to study in Europe. So they want to offer them this freedom. And one of our clients mentioned that what I want to offer my kids is freedom of choice in the future to live wherever they want. And if I can offer them a second passport, it's my gift to them. And I thought that was really, really interesting because, as I mentioned, this is something that gives you freedom. And we saw with COVID and everything that sometimes our freedom can be a danger. And this is, I think, an excellent program for that.
Wonderful. So you're doing sort of this American tour right now. What is the demand that you're seeing for this fund? What kind of interest is there?
Well, we're seeing many demand as more people know about this program and the possibility of not only investing, but having a second passport. What we have is demand from the LGBTQ community. So around 40% of our clients are from the LGBTQ plus community. We have many trans also that are concerned about their future. But once again, they are still living in the US, but they are also concerned about the future. And because in Portugal, there's the same-sex marriage, and we also are a very respectful society. And but we are seeing a demand not only from our community, but also from the Americans that are concerned about their rights and the political change that is that we are seeing now among America. But the demand is skyrocketing, yes.
Yeah, I would imagine. So for the LGBTQ plus community specifically, Portugal consistently ranks high for safety and quality of life for the LGBTQ plus community. How is a Portuguese Golden Visa not just an investment, but sort of a pathway into sort of that new life or a second life, if you were?
So actually, Portugal is one of the best LGBTQ plus friendly countries. And so, as I mentioned, we have the same-sex marriage. Everyone respects everyone. And the Golden Visa is much more than a paper permit. So it allows you to, it opens the door for another type of life. So you can have the ability to live somewhere, to work there, more security, respect for our way of life. And also you can have access to the Portuguese healthcare system, which is, I can tell you, 1/10 of the cost at least than in the US. So for example, you can have a very good healthcare insurance, private healthcare insurance by around 2,000 euros or $2,000 around that per year. And you can have even treatments in the US up to 1 million euros. So actually with the Portuguese private healthcare insurance, you can have treatments in the US that are much, much less expensive than in the US. So we have also clients that they are paying 20,000-30,000 per year in healthcare insurance in the US. They're also moving to Portugal because of that. Portuguese healthcare system is very good, but also you have access to schools, into a way of life which is the European way of life, more I think more respectful and from the rights that we have conquered so far.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of confusion right now with golden visas. I think sort of like during the pandemic, they became sort of the hot commodity around the world. And it seems like a lot of countries are shutting down or making their golden visas more restrictive. What's the case right now with Portugal, and maybe why should people consider acting faster rather than slower?
Yes, you're right, John. Over the last couple of years, many countries are shutting down their golden visa programs because of, in Europe, we had some scandals with Russian passports, and some countries were selling actually passports, and that's not what the European Commission wants. What they want is investment in the European Union or in the countries, and then you start with a residency program, and after 5 years, you can get the citizenship. And for example, Spain ended the Golden Visa program last year because of politics. Many people were afraid that it was the Golden Visa investors that were hiking the real estate property. It was nothing to do with that because the Golden Visas account only for 0.5% of the total sales. But the reality is that many governments are shutting down or changing the programs. Portugal also, in the end of November, we are going to have a discussion in the parliament, not for regarding the golden visa requirements, but for the nationality. So the nationality is going to go from 5 years to 7 or to 10 years. We still don't know. But what we are advising everyone that is interested is to move as fast as they can, because these programs usually tend to change. And one example of what happened 2 years ago was the real estate option. So Portugal had a very good golden visa program anchored on the real estate. And in October 2023, the government decided to take out that option. So actually, these days you can donate 250,000 euros. You can create 10 jobs in Portugal, or you can go through the investment fund path, which is, I think, the simplest one and the best for investors because it's the most transparent. But these programs are changing. So we saw a number of programs changing in EU. I think this Portuguese one is one of the last remaining that actually gives you lots of flexibility with a low investment so far.
Yeah, from our research, I think you're like one of 2 countries that have sort of as broad or as appetizing a golden visa. So for our listeners and viewers, what you're offering them is access to Portugal's golden visa, but not necessarily through making 10 jobs available for Portuguese citizens or necessarily buying real estate. You're offering it through the Portugal Golden Opportunities Fund, which is an optimized fund. In its simplest terms, for those who may not be familiar, what is the Portugal Golden Opportunities Fund?
The Portugal Golden Opportunities Fund is a fund managed by Optimize. We are an asset management company in Portugal since we were founded in 2008. And it's an open-ended fund, a mutual fund that invests in liquid assets. So we only invest in publicly traded companies, stocks and bonds. The fund cannot be leveraged, and it's a long-only strategy. So it's a very low risk because we have an exposure to bonds up to 25% on average, which helps reduce the risk and the volatility of the fund. But in order for a fund to be eligible for the Golden Visa, it has to comply with 3 criteria. So, for example, Optimize has 18 funds, but only one is eligible for the Golden Visa due to these specific criteria that are: you need to keep at least 60% investment in Portuguese companies. By Portuguese companies, John, is companies that the headquarters is in Portugal, but the revenue might come from outside Portugal. So we have companies, for example, where 80% of their revenue comes from outside Portugal, but because the headquarters is in Portugal, they are eligible for the Golden Visa. The second one is that the fund cannot invest directly or indirectly in real estate. It's completely forbidden after October 2023. And the third one is that the fund manager, Optimize, needs to compromise that the fund will stay open at least for the next 5 years. Because if you invest, you need to keep your investment for 5 years to get the access to the citizenship. So we do mention that we will maintain at least the 5 years, although it's an open-ended fund, so actually it's a perpetual fund. But we do declare that because like this, we comply with all regulation that makes the fund eligible.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So even today, we've gotten some pushback from folks on social media saying that, well, I don't want to go to Portugal and be the gentrifier to the Portuguese and ruin their quality of life and their standard of living. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why real estate is excluded from the fund or not allowed to be included in the fund?
Yeah, it is not included anymore because after October 2023, the government decided to take out from the real estate, from the Golden Visa options, because prices in Portugal were rising a lot. So we had real estate prices skyrocketing, but it was not due to the Golden Visa. It's due to the fact that we had 1.5 million immigrants or 1.7 million immigrants coming into Portugal over the last 5 years. So if you take into consideration that we are only 10 million, that has a toll on the real estate. Yeah. So actually it was taken out from the Golden Visa program. But John, what we have now is many Americans that go to Portugal for vacation, they just love what they see. And instead of going to Florida, they are buying houses in Portugal because it's 6 hours flight from New York or 12 hours from San Francisco. So it's direct flights. So what we have is Americans that are applying for the Golden Visa with the investment fund and then buying a house there because they really like what they see and because Portugal is considered the European California. So actually, I think that for those that do not know Portugal, they will be very, very surprised by it's like a Florida, but with the weather of California. And it's very, very good to live here. So we do have a huge demand and there is an American community that is being built in Portugal. Some of them, they are moving, others they don't. They still work in the US. Others, they are in Portugal and they work to US companies.
Nice.
I think one of the things I appreciate as an investor, especially if I'm going to take money, say, for example, from my retirement accounts and move it over into the fund, or I'm going to take some of my personal assets and move them over, I still have a broad diversity and opportunity for growth that a regular mutual fund or other investments in stocks and bonds have versus a house. I'm only invested in one individual property, and there's a lot of risk with all of your assets being tied up in one individual property, where you have that diversification and the potential for growth, which for folks, if you're paying attention for growth, that for many of us means retirement income. If we own a home worth 500,000 euros, we're probably not getting any income from that. So this gives you the opportunity then to have some income that could potentially pay for your rent if you're living in Portugal, or maybe even pay for your rent if you're living in the United States as you withdraw money from the fund as it grows.
Yeah, David, that's also an excellent question, even because our first clients, so the fund started in December 2021, and the first clients are making 59% over the last 3 years and 8 months. So actually, you have an excellent return. It's our best fund, around 13% a year. I would expect going forward around 7% a year. But as you mentioned, this is not a cost. It's an investment. So you are doing a 500,000 euros investment. You are getting a return over 5 years, or if you want to, and if you are very happy, you can keep your investment as long as you wish, 10 years, 20 years, etc. So you are making money on the fund that will pay you the costs to apply for the Golden Visa, the lawyers, and even if you want to, yes, the rent and everything. Actually, I think it's a good investment because of that. And as you mentioned, you can also, the US clients can also use their IRA accounts to invest in the fund. So not all the IRAs are eligible. So the traditional and the Roth IRAs, they cannot invest in foreign funds, but self-directed IRAs can. And it's a good way of diversifying from US dollar assets, even because the dollar this year is down around 14% against the euro, and Goldman Sachs predicts that the dollar might go down 10% more. And I really think that the dollar is going down because we are now entering in a new phase of the monetary policy in the US, which is interest rates are being lowered over the next couple of years from 4.25% around 3%. So the dollar will go down. And this investment is also an hedge. It's a way of diversifying from from dollar assets. And I think you cannot have everything on the same currency. You should diversify it. So it's a good fund, a different currency, which also allows you to hedge from this dollar devaluation.
I love all that. I just want to get that 59% retroactively.
Yeah, I do too.
Me too, because I'm also an investor in the fund. Me and my mother, we were the first investors, and we just bought more of the fund last month.
So Pedro, in doing our research, preparing for this episode, we looked at Optimize and we looked at the Golden Opportunities Fund, and one of the things that we noticed that there are other firms out there that also have what appears to be a version of this fund. Can you maybe share with us what some of the benefits are for using Optimize versus one of these other companies?
Yes, as the demand from US clients especially it grows a lot, we also have some clients from Asia that are also demanding for the Portugal Golden Visa. We have more offer in the Portuguese market. You have offers that go where the funds have to invest 100% in stocks, others more in bonds. Ours is a more balanced approach. So we know that we need to keep at least 60% in Portuguese stocks. So we don't want to be right on the lower limit. So we have around 65 to 70% exposure to Portuguese stocks, 5% international stocks, and 25% in bonds that will reduce the volatility and the risk of the fund. Also to mention that with our fund, because we only invest in publicly traded assets, stocks and bonds, our fund is eligible for IRA investment. Because if the funds would invest in stocks or companies that are not listed, you would need to create an LLC in the US, and that would be much more expensive. So in our case, because all the assets that we have are traded on a daily basis, we are IRA compatible. Also, we do comply with the PFIC rules, so the Passive Foreign Investment Company rules, which is very important for US investors because we are registered with the US IRS So we do report everything to the U.S. tax authorities. So you do not have any problem with us. And the last thing, we are the only fund that is registered with the U.S. SEC. So we are registered in the U.S. because the base of our clients is growing a lot. So we want to protect U.S. clients because we know that we have to declare everything to the U.S. IRAs, but also to reportings for the U.S. SEC. And it is forbidden for U.S., at least for an asset management company, to sell a fund to a U.S. person if we do not comply with U.S. regulations, specifically the U.S. Securities Act of 1933. So we registered our fund here, and so far we are the only fund that is registered and that we can go and come into the U.S. Like I am right now, and present the fund to U.S. persons. Otherwise, it would be illegal. So we want everyone to be protected. And just for you to know what could happen if you are buying a fund from an asset management company that is not registered here, is that the U.S. SEC can go to the Portuguese SEC and ask them for the asset management company to shut down the relation that they have with U.S. persons. And that would endanger the Golden Visa application because the asset management company, if not registered here, could be forced to close the relationship with you as a client. So, and we don't want that. That's why we comply with all the U.S. regulation.
Wonderful. So folks, if you're paying attention, you'll be able to verify Optimize's registration with the SEC on the SEC's website. We'll provide a link in the description, and our producer will probably show you a screenshot of what that looks like. So you can verify that everything is, all the T's have been crossed and all the I's have been dotted. Pedro, I think one of the concerns that many of our listeners and viewers have in the LGBTQ plus community is that many of us are kind of stunned that we're regressing so much here in the United States. So I'm curious, what's the strategy for Optimize to manage this fund in a downturn in the economy in general, or if the political winds shift in Portugal and maybe are a little bit less amenable to the LGBTQ plus community?
So for now, Portugal is a safe haven for us. And I say this because the major parties, they want to protect the way of life and what we conquered over the last 20 years. So there is no danger to change any rules or for the LGBTQ plus community to be endangered in that sense. But regarding some international changes, what we are facing is a huge demand for Portugal because, as I mentioned, we are now as a safe haven, and the way we protect the fund from international volatility is increased allocation into bonds and cash. Because if you remember, we need to maintain at least 60% in Portuguese stocks. We want to maintain around 65. We don't want to be right on the lower threshold because we need to comply all the times with the Golden Visa rules. So in order to protect from international volatility, we do increase the bond allocation. But just for you to understand how the Portuguese market behaves when there is huge uncertainty, let's go back to 2022. 2022 was the year that, unfortunately, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the European markets were down 20%, the S&P 500 was down 20%, the Nasdaq was down 33 or 34%. On that year, the Portuguese markets was up 3%, and we managed to get 4% in the fund. So actually, it was one of the best stock markets in the world. And why is that? Because the Portuguese companies, they pay very good dividends. So you have companies that pay between 5 to 9% dividend yield per year. So, and it's a small market. You have around 15, 16 investable companies, and on the bond side, around 30. But it's a very profitable one. So you have very good returns. One of the largest shareholders in the companies traded in the Portuguese market is the Norwegian Central Bank. And the reason they buy the shares in the Portuguese market is because of these dividends. And the dividends, because they are so good, it protects from international volatility, because if you have a company that pays you 10%, even if the market is going down, you don't want to sell it. And that's what happened in 2022. So everyone was down a lot, but because the Portuguese market is composed by supermarket chains, electricity companies, telecommunications, so telecoms. So you have a market that is very utility-like market, and it's very protected by default. Of course, if we feel that something is going bad, that something bad is going to happen in the market, we can always increase the allocation into bonds and liquidity.
Awesome.
Cash.
Thank you for explaining that. That's some great context, because I know that for a lot of LGBTQ plus people, even if they go to another country, I think there's still going to be sort of this trauma that we're all going to have to get over.
Yeah.
To some degree.
No, fortunately, not in Portugal, and things are very stable. The community is very united, and there's no danger at all of things changing there. Fortunately.
Yeah.
So, Pedro, if somebody wants to invest in this fund, but they don't have the 500,000 euro to be able to qualify for the Golden Visa, but they still want to invest what they have available, is that an option?
In order to apply for the Golden Visa, you need to invest the 500,000 euros. The problem here is that the cost is, and the investment is higher because the dollar is coming down. For example, instead of $520,000, which was the investment required on the beginning of the year, currently you need to invest 600,000. But what can you do? You can use your IRA accounts. Sometimes people don't have that money on the savings account, so you can use your retirement, your IRA account, or a combination between IRA and savings accounts. And another thing that we have been seeing is that many parents are giving donations to their children. So imagine that you have 250,000 euros or dollars, and your parents donate you 250,000. So you can apply for the Golden Visa, and if you want, you can bring your parents. So actually, it's a smart way. If the parents do a donation, it's a smart way for them to get on board also into the Golden Visa program with one investment. And this is also very important to mention, which is with one investment, you can bring spouse, parents, children, and dependents. If the children are over 18, what you can do as a parent is donate to them and then have them bring you up under the family reunification. So with one investment, actually, you can have 5 or 6 people coming. So I think that if you think really, you can have smart ways of getting the 500,000 euros or the 600 euros through a combination of IRA and non-IRA, or through donations within the family, and then you can bring the whole family,
including our dogs.
The dogs are free. Including the dogs.
Perfect. I like that.
So it from what you were just saying, it does sound like it all has to be under one person's name, right? It can't be mom and dad have a portion and then I have a portion and then my kids have a portion. You're saying that everything needs to be combined under one, for lack of a better way of saying, I guess, one tax ID. Was that right?
Yeah, David. So actually, you need the main applicant. It can only be one tax ID. And the first thing is that the main applicant must require the Portuguese tax ID. Usually the law firms take care of that in Portugal, but you need a tax ID because it's that tax ID that is going to be the primary applicant. And then with the family reunification, you can bring spouse, parents, children, and dependents, and the dogs also, everyone. But yes, you need only one applicant. And one thing that sometimes happens is that people, when they wire the funds to us, they send the funds to some joint accounts. And it's not possible. It must be the main applicant that always makes the investment. And then, so for example, if you are in the US, you just have joint accounts, you need to open an account where you are the only account holder, send the funds back to Portugal, and then because we will need to issue 2 declarations for the Golden Visa. One, which is from the bank, that will mention that you wired more than 500,000 euros from outside Portugal, And then you have the one declaration, and that declaration must mention the name of the applicant. So if you send through a joint account, it will have two names and it will not match. That's the main reason why it's only one applicant. And for the Golden Visa, also the government only requires that only one applies, and then you can, through the family reunification, you can bring everyone.
Nice. And then, to be clear to everybody, once that investment is made to Optimize, you pretty much handle everything from that point going forward, including opening up the IRA account or the self-directed IRA account, and everything else after that. Is that correct?
So, no, actually the US investment must open an account with the IRA custodian in the US.
Okay.
Because we only take care of the Portuguese asset management. So we do not do the legal part. We have lawyers that we can also recommend that we work with. But what in the US, you need to work with a primary IRA custodian company that allows our fund. There are 2 or 3 that are eligible in the US. And basically, you need to open an account there. You need to roll over your existing funds from the traditional IRA or from the Roth IRA, or even a self-directed IRA that is, for example, at Schwab's or Fidelity that do not accept investing in your fund. You have to roll over all of these funds into a self-directed IRA custodian that accepts our fund, and then from there, the funds will go to Optimize.
Gotcha.
So you need these 3 things. You need the IRA custodian in the US, Optimize account, and also regarding the legal structure, you'll need someone in Portugal to support you.
Wonderful. Pedro, thank you for setting up this fund. I think this is going to be very intriguing for a lot of our listeners and viewers. And thank you so much for coming on the show and explaining all the details. I'm sure there's going to be some heavy demand coming up here shortly.
Yeah. And folks, if you have any questions around what Pedro has discussed, or any questions in general about the whole process, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at questions@debtfreeguys.com, and we'll be able to collect those, share those with Pedro, and then we'll be able to get that information and maybe have a follow-up video talking about some of those questions.
Thank you, Pedro.
John and David, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present a fund that I think it's an opportunity also for our community, and people have to know that these things exist, that the Plan B is achievable, and I think it's, as we mentioned, is an edge to the uncertainty that is now in the world and even in the US. So thank you a lot for the opportunity that you gave us.
Of course.
Thank you. Darlings, this isn't just investing, it's a passport to fabulous. With the Optimize Portugal Golden Opportunities Fund, a 500,000 euro move gets you a Portugal Golden Visa, daily liquidity, and an EU passport in just 5 years.
Bring your partner, your kids, even your parents. Visa-free Schengen travel and Portugal's low-cost lifestyle included. Scan the QR code or click the link in the video description to explore how. Thank you for joining us. Join us next week when we share one of the other countries in Asia that has legalized marriage equality, and that is Taiwan. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to cover smart money strategies for that $6,000 boomer bonus from Trump's one big bloated bill.
If you love this episode, like, subscribe, and share it with your friends who also want to retire abroad. And until next time, stay fabulous. If you want a real-life example of someone who's invested in the Optimized Golden Opportunities Fund and making Portugal his Plan B, check out this video here where we interviewed one of Pedro's customers.